I went into the hospital for heart surgery. A bypass, nothing minor. They told me to focus on recovery, rest, heal, trust my wife to handle things at home. So I did. But when I came back, my name was gone, off the house deed, erased. 32 years of mortgage payments, maintenance, repainting every 5 summers, gone with one signature. Hers. She didn't say a word, just smiled and said, "It's easier this way." But what she didn't know is that before I went under the knife, I'd changed something too, the will. And unlike the deed, she never thought to read that. So if you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted most, stick around, because this story ends where she least expected it, and it begins with a man who refused to die stupid. Before the betrayal, things were quiet, too quiet maybe. My name's Grant Delaney. I'm 62, retired after 40 years in construction. Built homes for other people, made sure their foundations held even when mine started to crack. My wife Linda and I had been married for 34 years. No kids, just the two of us in a single-story ranch outside Austin, Texas. 2 bedrooms, 1 fireplace, a front porch that creaked like an old man's knees in the winter. We weren't perfect, but who is after 3 decades? She had her garden, I had my garage, and when my heart started acting up, tightness, dizziness, climbing stairs felt like lifting bricks. I figured it was age catching up, but the cardiologist said it was serious. A triple bypass, needed to be done in less than 2 weeks. Linda didn't flinch. She nodded, said we'd get through it. She packed my hospital bag while I gathered paperwork, insurance, bills, and yes, the will. Just in case. I slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk, freshly updated. I didn't tell her about the changes. I wasn't hiding it. I just wanted one thing to still be mine. On the morning of the surgery, she kissed me on the forehead and said, "You just focus on waking up." And I did. But you know, something felt off even then. Her eyes didn't match her voice. I can't explain it. It was like her face said goodbye, but her hands were already letting go. I stayed in that hospital bed for 12 days, tubes in my arms, monitors beeping. Visitors? Just 2 times, both short. She brought soup once, then didn't come back for a week. I figured maybe she was overwhelmed. Hospitals scare some people. Or maybe she needed space, but the truth? She wasn't scared. She was busy signing things, busy erasing me from the home I built. And I didn't know it yet, but the house I would return to wouldn't be mine anymore. Before I take you there, let me ask, have you ever come back from something hard, only to realize you've got a whole new storm waiting? Yeah, that's where this really begins. I came home 12 pounds lighter, stitched down the chest, walking like a man twice my age. The house was clean, too clean, like it had been staged, like it wasn't lived in anymore. Linda greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, said she'd hired a cleaning crew just to make it fresh. But the framed photo of our wedding was gone from the hallway. My recliner had been moved to the guest room. And my tools, my toolbox I'd kept organized since 1985, were shoved into plastic bins in the garage corner like they were for donation. I didn't ask. I just watched. She made me tea, sat across the kitchen island, and said, "You should rest. Don't worry about anything. I've handled all the house paperwork while you were recovering." House paperwork. That's when my stomach dropped. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a file folder, set it in front of me like she was offering soup. I opened it slowly. Title transfer, property tax records, all with her name only. She must have seen the color drain from my face because she said almost gently, "It's just easier this way, Grant. In case something happens to you, I won't get tied up in probate." I was thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. I wasn't even cold in the ground. "You signed over the deed," I said. She didn't deny it. "You gave me power of attorney." It was legal. Yes, I had. Temporary power. So she could talk to doctors, sign insurance forms. Not this. Not rob me while I was under anesthesia. But I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. I just nodded, took the folder, and said I was tired. Because I was. Tired of being blind. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how many days she'd waited before making those copies. 3, 4, she moved fast, but so could I. And that will in my bottom drawer suddenly felt like the only card I had left. Before I show you how I played it, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and realized they'd planned your absence long before you left? Because that moment, it changes everything. The next morning, I walked out to the mailbox slowly, stiffly, like a man carrying the weight of a home that was no longer his. Inside, I found something odd, an unopened envelope addressed to Linda Delaney, sole property owner. That line punched harder than any scalpel ever did. I took it inside, sat at the dining table and stared at it. The table we'd bought 30 years ago. The same table where we ate chili on cold nights and argued about politics we didn't understand. I looked around that room, our room, and realized her fingerprints were everywhere. Except her heart. So I opened the drawer, the bottom one, the one with the will, and I read it again. 5 weeks before my surgery, I'd changed it. Quietly, I didn't leave everything to Linda anymore. I named the Veterans Housing Foundation as the primary beneficiary, but only under one condition, that the house be sold while I was still alive. If she tried to cash in before my death, the money would go to the foundation, not her. It was legal, clear, witnessed. And she had no clue. She never read it, because she never thought she'd need to. That night, I emailed my lawyer, sent scanned copies, and told him what had happened. He replied within the hour, "Legally, your wife used the power of attorney in bad faith. But we don't need to sue yet. Let's wait. Let her act." Let her act. And she did. 3 days later, I overheard her on the phone. Bedroom door slightly open. "He's recovering fine, but I still think we should go ahead with the appraisal. I've got a buyer lined up. Cash." A buyer? Already? The pieces clicked into place like cold metal teeth. She wasn't just taking the house. She was flipping it fast, before I could fight back. But I wasn't the same man who went into that hospital. I may have lost my strength, but not my sense, and from that moment on, every word I spoke was measured, every nod, calculated. She thought I was resting, but I was watching, waiting. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with rage. It comes with silence. Have you ever had to smile while someone plotted to erase you? Stick with me. This is where it starts to turn. She started staging the house a week later. Furniture shifted, family photos boxed, her garden clippings tossed in the bin like they meant nothing. I asked her, calmly, "Planning something?" She smiled. "Just clearing space. Feels lighter, doesn't it?" I nodded, said nothing. But that night, while she was asleep, I checked her laptop. The browser history said everything. Cash buyers for quick home sale in Austin, legal eviction of spouse after deed transfer. And then, a saved draft email to a realtor. "We'll proceed once he's out of the house, should be within 10 days. 10 days? She already had a timeline to make me disappear. So I moved faster, called my lawyer again the next morning, asked about timing, language, and my legal right to remain in the house. He said, "If she lists the house and moves forward without disclosure of your life estate right, it'll backfire hard." But we have to let her sign first. That's the trigger. I asked, so I just wait? He said, you wait, quietly, because once she signs, she loses everything. So I waited, and I smiled at her omelets in the morning. I nodded at her open house flyers. I pretended not to hear her talking to buyers over speakerphone. She was planning her escape like it was a cruise to freedom, and I was her luggage, heavy, disposable. But the day came sooner than I expected. She walked into the living room and said, I've got great news. The house is sold. We close in 2 weeks. Sold, just like that. 32 years of paint, repairs, winters and summers and stories handed over for cash. But she hadn't read the will. She didn't know that by selling, she'd triggered the clause. And now, every dollar from that sale wasn't going to her. It was going to the foundation, to people who'd never betray a man in a hospital bed. And me, I wouldn't be evicted. I'd be protected by the same paperwork she ignored. Before I show you how it all fell apart for her, let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone light their own fuse thinking it was a candle? Because that moment was coming next. The morning of the closing, Linda was glowing. She wore her pearl earrings, the ones she saved for new chapters, and a blue blouse I hadn't seen in years. She said, after the paperwork, I thought we'd celebrate with dinner, maybe Red Lobster like old times. I said, sounds nice. She handed me a manila envelope. These are the last things to sign, just formalities. I took the envelope. My fingers didn't shake. Inside were disclosures, disclaimers, transfer authorizations, standard sale documents, except there was no mention of me. Not one line about my occupancy. No Grant Delaney has right to reside. No shared equity. Nothing. She'd erased me on paper again, so I smiled, slid the documents into a drawer and said, I'll look these over after lunch. Linda's face twitched just for a second. Then she covered it with that same polished smile. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. He said, she's walked into the trap. Once the sale finalizes and funds move, we notify the title company. Her name's not on the will. She gets nothing. And so, it closed, just like that. $428,000 wired into an escrow account. 3 hours later, my lawyer issued the letter. All proceeds redirected under Will Clause 4.2, charitable transfer in case of sale during Grant Delaney's lifetime. The title company froze disbursement, contacted Linda. Her phone call to me came minutes later, screaming, crying, accusing. You tricked me, she yelled. You can't do this, it's my house. I said, calm as a quiet lake. No, it was our house, until you signed it away. She hung up, and I sat back in my recliner, the same recliner she once shoved into the garage, now back where it belonged, and me, still in the home she tried to sell out from under me. But now protected, legally, fully, finally, she moved out the next day, didn't say goodbye, just left behind a scarf on the banister. And silence. But that silence, it felt like justice. Before we close this chapter, let me ask, have you ever watched someone throw away everything because they thought you were too weak to fight? That silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of me winning. The next week, a manila envelope showed up in my mailbox, inside legal papers. Linda was suing me. She claimed unjust enrichment, emotional distress, and said I'd manipulated a vulnerable spouse. Funny, I was the one in the hospital when she took my name off the deed. Now I was the manipulator. I brought the papers to my lawyer. He scanned through them, smiled, and said, "She's bluffing. This won't hold." Turns out, Not only had she ignored the will, she'd also signed 2 declarations during the sale stating the property had no residential claims or life estate restrictions. That made it fraud. Not my fraud, hers. The foundation's legal team got involved next. They had more lawyers than she had friends, and they weren't interested in being lenient. Her claim was dismissed before it even reached a courtroom. And me? I stayed right where I was, in the house, in my recliner, sipping hot coffee every morning, watching the wind move through the trees I planted with my own hands 25 years ago. But Linda didn't disappear. I saw her twice more. First time at the pharmacy. She didn't say a word, just looked at me with eyes that used to smile, now hollow. Second time outside the courthouse. She was standing next to a pay-by-the-week motel shuttle, holding 2 suitcases alone. She looked at me like I was the ghost, but I wasn't. I was just the man who refused to die stupid. Sometimes, gentlemen, silence is a hammer. You don't swing it, you just let it sit. Let the weight of it crack the lies around you. And eventually, everything falls apart without raising your voice. I never wanted to hurt her. I just wanted her to understand. You don't erase someone who built the very ground beneath your feet. Before I tell you what I did with the money, me. Let me ask you, have you ever looked at someone who once promised you forever and realized they only meant it until paperwork got in the way? Because what you do after that moment says everything about the kind of man you are. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of betrayal. It was peace. The morning sun still came through the east window, warming the floorboards I refinished myself in '98. The kettle still whistled at 7:30 sharp, and my old dog, Rusty, God bless him, still sat by the screen door watching squirrels like he had a score to settle. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. I started putting things back where they belonged. Hung our wedding photo again. Not for her, but for the version of us that once existed. Moved my recliner back into the den. Took down the for sale sign myself. It was still in the garage, shoved behind a stack of her gardening pots. She hadn't taken it with her. Maybe part of her thought she'd come back, but she didn't, and I didn't chase her. You see, revenge isn't always about watching someone burn. Sometimes it's about planting your feet on the porch you built with your own hands and knowing no one can take it from you again. That will, the one she never read, it didn't just protect the money, it protected me. My right to sit in this chair, my right to keep the house warm in winter and cool in summer. My right to breathe easy on the land I paid for, square foot by square foot through sweat, blisters, and overtime hours. The foundation got their share. I made sure of it. Half the sale proceeds funded 3 housing units for disabled veterans in the hill country. I got a thank you letter last week, handwritten, from a man named Chuck, who hadn't had a kitchen in 5 years. Made me tear up a little. Linda didn't just lose money, she lost the chance to do something good with it. And me? I didn't lose anything. Not really. Because sometimes keeping what's yours isn't about fighting harder. It's about outlasting the people who think you won't. Let me ask. Have you ever sat in the same chair for 30 years and realized the only thing that changed was who tried to steal it? Because that chair still creaks, but it's mine. You'd think winning would feel like a parade. It doesn't. It feels like sitting alone in a quiet house, watching the shadows stretch across walls you painted together, and realizing you still reach for her coffee mug by accident. Every morning I brewed 2 cups, even after she left. Habit's a funny thing. So is love, I guess. Not the kind you sing about, the kind that survives chores, shared bills, arguments over thermostat settings, the kind that dies slow, while both people pretend it's still breathing. I didn't hate her. Truth is, I missed the version of her from 20 years ago, the one who danced in the kitchen to Elvis on Saturday mornings, the one who cried when we paid off the mortgage. But somewhere along the line, love turned into convenience, and convenience turned into control, and control, that turned into signatures I never saw coming. I spent most days walking around the property, just me, the wind, and my thoughts. Fixed the shed roof, replaced a few broken boards on the fence, fed the birds, read the local paper with a cup of black coffee and 2 slices of rye toast. No fanfare, just peace. But sometimes, late at night, I'd lie in bed and wonder, was it my fault? Was I too quiet, too trusting, too old? Then I'd remember something my father told me when I was a boy, back when he taught me how to pour concrete. Measure twice, pour once, and never let anyone build on your foundation without your say. That stuck with me. So no, I wasn't too trusting. I was just slow to realize some people don't deserve what you built. And when they show you that, you don't rebuild with them. You reinforce your walls. I know some of you watching have felt this. Maybe you're feeling it now. That cold space next to you where a promise used to sleep. That empty cup no one pours anymore. Before I tell you how this story ends, let me ask you something from one man to another. Have you ever protected something with everything you had, only to learn the real damage came from inside? Because that's the hardest kind of storm to see coming. Fall came early that year. The leaves on my old elm tree turned gold overnight like someone lit them from inside. I sat on the porch one morning, wrapped in a flannel blanket, mug in hand, watching the light spill over the lawn, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt whole. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Rejoined the Veterans Breakfast group on Tuesdays, brought my old fishing rods down from the attic and cleaned every reel like they were made of gold. Volunteered twice a month at the community hardware co-op, teaching young guys how to use a level properly, because most of them couldn't hang a shelf straight to save their lives. Funny how grief makes you small, but routine, it makes you real again. People started saying I looked lighter. Maybe they were right. I'd stopped carrying the weight of being deceived, stopped waiting for a door to open that was long closed. One afternoon, I walked into the living room, looked at the wall where Linda's painting used to hang, and realized I didn't remember what it looked like anymore. I remembered the silence she left behind, but the color, the image, gone. That's when I knew I'd let go. The house didn't feel like our house anymore. It felt like mine. Not in the angry, possessive way, but in the quiet, grounded way. Every nail, every floorboard, every creaky step, I'd earned it. Not through revenge, through resilience. Sometimes the greatest justice isn't about making someone pay. It's about living well enough that their absence becomes your peace. And trust me, peace has a sound. It's the coffee pot bubbling before sunrise, the breeze through a half-cracked window on a Sunday morning, the thud of work boots hitting hardwood as you go out to water the lawn. You know that sound? You've earned it too. Before I tell you where I ended up and how I really closed this chapter, let me ask you something. Have you ever rebuilt something? Not because you had to, but because it was yours to finish? If you have, then you already know how this story ends. 6 months later, the for sale sign was gone. Not just from the lawn, from my heart. The house was no longer a memory of betrayal. It became a space I honored. Each room got a fresh coat of paint. Nothing flashy, just clean, solid colors, earth tones. The kind that don't ask for attention, but last. I replaced the kitchen light fixture myself, even though it made my shoulder ache for a week. It was worth it, because I did it on my own time, in my own house. No one watching, no one rushing me, and every time I flipped that switch, it clicked with a sound that reminded me, this space is mine. I didn't just reclaim a home. I reclaimed time, control, dignity. Every Sunday morning, I sit on that porch and read the obituaries. Not out of fear, but to remind myself how many stories end before people ever get a chance to write their last chapter. Mine didn't end in a hospital bed. It didn't end in a courtroom. It didn't even end when she walked away. It began again, with a will she never bothered to read, and that's what saved me. You see, men like us, we're taught to endure, to keep the peace, to let things go, but sometimes letting go means making sure the truth survives, even if the marriage doesn't. I still get calls from mutual friends. Some of them ask what happened between us. I don't give details, I just say, we had different definitions of forever. Then I go back to sanding the porch rail, or feeding the birds, or watching the weather roll in from the west, because that's what life becomes when you stop chasing answers. It becomes living, and when you finally breathe deep without waiting for the next betrayal, that's when you know. You didn't lose, you endured, and now you get to decide what peace sounds like. Before I share one last thing, let me ask, have you ever survived something that should have broken you, but ended up setting you free? Because that's where the real story lives. I didn't win with rage, I won with patience and a pen. That's the part most people miss about stories like this. They expect fire, explosions, screaming matches in courtrooms. But the real victories, they're quiet, like a locked drawer that no one checked, like a will that sat unread until it rewrote everything. When Linda took my name off the deed, she thought I'd just fade away, that I'd be too weak, too tired, too old to fight back. But I didn't need fists. I had foresight. I had a lifetime of paying attention when it mattered most. So if you've ever felt erased, replaced, or betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole life, you're not alone, you're not done, and you're not powerless. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you take back, it's what you never let them steal. If this story feels close to your heart, leave me a comment. Tell me how you survived your own storm, even just 2 words, still standing. That's enough, because men like us, we've earned that.